tight ends are it's brutal, man. We had guys like
It's getting
number
getting
one
tough
on the
out
week,
here.
Dallas Goedert, like we all projected.
Jimmy Graham caught a touchdown.
Jimmy Graham caught a touchdown. David Njoku was a top 5 option. But number 7 on the week was my guy, a guy that I almost had as a deep shot this week, but as the week has gone on, I've just become more and more confident. Went back and watched the game film. It's Logan Thomas. It's a guy you may have never heard of. He's a 29-year-old.
This is crazy.
That came into the league as a quarterback out of Virginia Tech, and this is the tight end for the Washington football team. They're up against Arizona. I'll talk about the matchup here in a second, but Logan Thomas, for those who don't know, he's a physical specimen. 6'6", 250 pounds, almost the same measurables there as Darren Waller. And he was a 4th-round pick. He played on 74% of snaps in week 1 and led the Washington football team in targets, more than Terry McLaurin. Dontrell Inman was out there with 5 targets. Steven Sims only saw 3 in this game, but Logan Thomas looks like he's going to be an option that Dwayne Haskins is going to rely upon. He had 8 targets, caught 4 of them for 37 yards and a touchdown. I think there's upside in that target volume where, if he catches 6 for 8 and does something with those catches, maybe even they are red zone looks, you have a tremendously high upside in Logan Thomas. He was on the field, like I said, 74% of snaps, so high utilization for a guy who wasn't on the team last year and really hasn't been, active playing football in the league very much relative to his age specifically. He tied for 2nd among all tight ends in targets, a 26% target share last week. I'm not trying to project that out for the entire season, but that's what we want to see from an Alpha X wide receiver, that 25%. That's like what guys like Adam Thielen and Julio Jones are getting on a weekly basis. So to see 26% target share for Logan Thomas, that's extremely encouraging to me. He was getting open and Haskins was looking for him. He was 11th on the week in average target distance. So it's not like he's just getting these check down short options near the line of scrimmage. He was running up the seam, looked pretty good out there. And I think in this matchup, the matchup is what is really the icing on the cake and solidifies Logan Thomas as the start of the week. I think the Washington football team is going to be trailing to this Arizona offense that looked explosive in week 1. I know we like Washington's front 7 based on what we saw, the new Chase Young experience that they got going up there. It's scary, but I think Arizona's going to be able to move the ball and be explosive here, and it's going to be a great matchup. In 2019, the Arizona Cardinals gave up 16.1 fantasy points a week to the tight end position. That was number 1 by over 4 fantasy points. And last year we were streaming guys like
Jacob Hollister.
Yeah, Jacob Hollister, Ricky Seals-Jones, these deeper names. And so to get a guy who's a starting tight end in the league and is already being utilized heavily, I love it in this matchup. If you had a guy like I did, Blake Jarwin went down, I'm picking up Logan Thomas and I'm plugging him right in there. Alex, are you thinking I'm a crazy person right now with what I'm saying here on such a deep name in Logan Thomas?
A little bit, yeah, but you actually make a pretty good case there. I like a lot of the things you said. The targets are obviously encouraging. The snap counts are encouraging. He played 74% of snaps last week, and the opportunity's there for Logan Thomas. He saw the volume in week 1. It's going to be tough.
He saw the volume in what was a pretty competitive game script. This wasn't a blowout where the Eagles went up big and it was garbage time. This isn't a competitive matchup, so imagine what we could see if Arizona goes up big in week 2.
And it was a low-volume game in terms of this Washington football team's passing offense as well. Haskins, didn't necessarily circle the wagons for 300 yards, but Steph, there's a case for starting Logan Thomas. I don't think you go out in week 2 and start him over like a Hunter Henry or, TJ Hawkinson.
Jared Cook.
Jared Cook. You don't start him over guys like that, but you make a good point. If you had George Kittle, who's hurt, if he doesn't end up playing on Sunday, if you had Blake Jarwin, maybe Mike Gesicki is sketching you out a little bit after what we've seen from them, I don't mind starting Logan Thomas. You could definitely do worse at the position. Steph, he's only rostered in 6% of leagues right now, so he's going to be available. I know you're probably driving that percentage up from like 3 to 6 because you probably picked him up everywhere.
Definitely.
But check your waiver wire, and if you really need a tight end, if you're in a tough spot, throw the dart on Logan Thomas. Even if you have a bench spot, that's available, that's someone you're not excited about, pick up Logan Thomas, and if he ends up putting together a couple of good weeks here, you could have a really good trade chip at the position. I've said it all offseason, the tight end position is like musical chairs. There's normally more teams in the league than there are good every week starters at the tight end spot. So if you end up with 2 of them, you end up with a really good trade piece to improve your roster. So a bit of a crazy take.
And when
there.
tight ends break out, they break out hard.
Yep.
You see a guy go from 20th to a top 12 name. Go ahead and just get him on your team early. Stash him if you feel desperate at the tight end spot. But Alex, I want to hear yours. From what I'm reading here on our show sheet, are you trying to copy me from week 1? Is that what we're doing here?
You did so good in week 1. I just want to be like you, man. And this isn't the 29-year-old breakout change position tight end like Logan Thomas, but it's all reliable. And Jared Cook at the Las Vegas Raiders, first game in the Death Star out in Vegas. It's going to be cool to see. But Jared Cook, great game last week. 5 catches for 80 yards on 7 targets. You called it really solid plug-and-play. Start of the week at the tight end spot. Was a tight end 10 on the week. So if you waited in your draft and got Jared Cook, you're pretty happy with that. And this comes down to opportunity. I mean, Michael Thomas is going to be out. So Jared Cook should have massive involvement this week on Monday Night Football from Drew Brees. It's a solid matchup against the Carolina Panthers. That defense, or not against the Carolina Panthers, against the Las Vegas Raiders. That game the Raiders had against the Panthers last week was very back and forth. It was a shootout. Both teams were able to do a ton on the offensive side of the ball. So this Raiders defense doesn't necessarily scare me too much here on Monday Night Football. So I look for Jared Cook to see a really good target share this week. I expect him to have touchdown upside. We talked about it last week on the pod. Jared Cook had an insane touchdown rate last year, one that there's no way he could replicate it this season, but it's great to see him, at least in week 1, getting a ton of volume in a way that could lead to a ton of touchdowns this year. So I think Jared Cook has a ton of upside this week. The volume should provide a higher floor than we're used to with Cook, and you're not just going to be praying for a touchdown for him to have a good fantasy week. I think the floor is going to be there, and if the touchdown comes, you're actually going to end up with a ton of upside and a potential top 5 option here in week 2.